third meeting of the Citizens Police Advisory Council. This time I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody who's here in person as well as anybody joining online. We've got a pretty good meeting today. Let's go ahead and get started. Jill, if you would, roll call, or Maylee, I'm sorry, Maylee, welcome.
Juwan Fielding. Doris Grant. Toby Holly. Thomas Hummel.
Here.
Bill Krakowski. Jamie Kahn.
Here.
Joe Kraus.
Here.
Philip Bussier.
Here.
Kristen McIver.
Here.
Leonardo Reeder.
Here.
David Saulnier.
Here.
Paul Tamburino.
Here.
Emma Jean Thomas. Here. Laura Washington.
Here.
All right, thank you. Do we have a quorum? Thank you. So we do have a quorum. First thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and welcome. We have two new council members joining us this meeting. I'll start with Ty Washington representing District 7. That's for Councilmember Waring. Ty, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and welcome?
Well, good evening. My name is Tyrone Washington. Everybody calls me Ty. I was nominated by Mr. Waring, and I'm a West Ashley resident, have been my whole life. Currently, I'm a real estate broker. I have a brokerage house as well as working for Central Aluminum in Goose Creek, South Carolina. Excited to join the team.
Thank you. We're really looking forward to it. So we appreciate you joining. Our other newest member is Gil Kurlikowski, representing District 8, which is Councilmember Seekings. I don't see him on the call. He was on our executive subcommittee meeting, so I did get to meet him then. So at his next meeting, he's available. I'll have him introduce himself to the group. All right. So
I am here.
there you are. We didn't hear you during the roll call. Gil, go ahead and tell us all about yourself.
No, I'm delighted to be here, and Tyrone, it's nice to meet you, Ty, very much as a new member. So we've been here about a little over 6 years. Councilmember Seekings encouraged me to be a part of this and to help to give something back to the community and the department. And we've done that for quite a few years for the police department over the 6 years that we've been here. So we're looking forward to being a member of this organization and contributing wherever I can. So thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you, Gil. And so everybody knows, I mean, Gil, you and I have talked about it. You know, obviously a lot of what we do is educational for us as well as the department. So maybe you want to share your background that shows how you'll enhance our abilities as well.
Sure. I had a long career in policing. I served as Seattle's police chief for 6 years, or 9 years, actually. Just flew by, and I went there after the famous kind of Battle of Seattle, the World Trade Organization. The chief resigned a few months later, and I took over the department for 9 years. And then I went to the Obama administration for 8 years, first as his drug policy advisor, and then the last 3 years as the commissioner of Customs and Border Protection. And then we saw that it was a great opportunity to come to Charleston. I have a cousin in Somerville, and we'd always enjoyed coming here. And there was just no reason to stay in Washington, D.C. when you can be in Charleston.
We appreciate it. Thanks, Gil. Definitely looking forward to your input. So at this point, we want to go ahead and do our citizen participation. Normally we do 2 minutes, but for this meeting, we're going to go ahead and grant 2.5 minutes. Maylee, if you would, I believe we have 4 people.
So, to speak.
Okay.
To speak today. Start with Jerome Harris.
Jerry?
Thank you. Good evening, commission members. My name is Jerry Harris. I am a former member of the CPAC, former vice chair, and welcome to the new members. Today's meeting is an important meeting And Mark, to point in the discussion, item number 8, the EPA report feedback review is important. I was really happy to see as many members of CPAC present at the CAJM Monday Night Forum. It was lively. Getting to this point, however, I have a couple of concerns about this session. All right. Originally, I think CPAC discussed when I was still on the board, perhaps having a special session to discuss this. It was decided to have it as part of a regular meeting. The notice to this was not broadly generated, so it probably accounts for some of the lack of the public participation. And I think that's something that you need to look at as a group in terms of if we intended to do outreach and engage the community to make certain that they know that this opportunity is there. For example, last Tuesday night when I was at the city council meeting, I mentioned the fact that the meeting was happening, and in fact, it hadn't been posted yet. Okay, so the whole notion, it was also understood going to be put on Facebook, on the city's Facebook. I'm not sure that it got there. So the capacity of support for you to do your outreach, I think, is important. A couple of recommendations, looking at the agenda. It occurred to me that you do not include, as the city council does, the reports and the information when you post the agenda. All right, so people don't have an idea of what it is, the substance, at least in terms of what's being talked about. So figuring out a way of having attaching the summary of your meetings would be, I think, helpful and important. At the last meeting, I distributed, meeting before last, I think I distributed a study on community police advisory boards, best practices. And I think perhaps you should consider, as part of the process that we're going through in this period, answering the questions, is CPAC the best community engagement strategy for Charleston? Are there realistic expectations for CPAC? Do the members have the expertise to weigh in on policy matters? Is CPAC adequately resourced? Is the membership adequately diverse? Is there an effective turnover replacement mechanism? We've got a lot of new members. You're losing a lot of folks. So in the future, is going to continue. How do you not lose that information? And finally, are the protocols and operating procedures adequate to match up with what it is that you're charged to do? Look forward to hearing the response from the questions.
Thank you.
Christine Jennings.
Good evening. I'm Christine Jennings. I'm a resident of West Ashley. On September 30th, CAJM hosted a second community forum to solicit questions on CPD's response to the ERA report and to share a well-researched proposal for a safer city with more efficient policing that, at the same time, is proven to reduce racial disparities. We had a diverse crowd of over 110 people from the NAACP, Urban League, Lens, Black Lives Matter, neighborhood associations, HARC, CPAC, College of Charleston, and CAJM. Regarding the response to CPD's report, the community had many questions. They noted overwhelmingly that racial disparities in traffic stops had not been addressed when it had been the primary reason for the audit in 2019 and the subsequent ERA report. They want to know the plan to address those disparities. Given the unfinished work in CPD's report, they asked how it could be called final. The community requests independent third-party monitoring until all recommendations have come to completion. Regarding the response to the proposal for a safer and more equitable Charleston, the community expressed overwhelming support for the policy and urged rapid action by city leadership. CAJM has shared with you a written response to the report overall and submitted 8 specific questions for CPD response. We also sent the top additional questions from Monday's forum. CPD now has a full range of priority questions representing the people of Charleston. We all anticipate complete answers to those questions and request the respect of an open dialogue between CPD and stakeholders. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, so everybody should have received the minutes for the previous meeting. Do we have a motion to accept those minutes?
So moved.
All right, any discussion? All right, all in favor of accepting and you should, let me just clarify, you should have had amended minutes. So the amended version that promoted Captain Fratello to his current rank. I think that was the only correction we needed, so we appreciate that. So all in favor of accepting the minutes as published, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Approved. August 2024 minutes are approved. Who gave second? Harrison MacGyver. Thank you. All right, at this point, we're gonna get the deputy chief statement today. So Deputy Chief Jenkins.
Yes, good evening. Jill is gonna give us a presentation on the ERA report to this committee. As you guys have heard the Chief Walker say previously, it's time for us to turn the page now. So what that means is turning the page. The audit is over, but it's not over, all right? So moving forward, what we'll be looking at doing is putting some of these recommendations into our strategic plan. Our strategic plan is what's going to govern us for the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to be a living, breathing document. Every month, we have meetings, command staff meetings here at CPD, where we'll be talking about issues and still moving along with some of the recommendations from the audit. So, that's all I have.
Any updates from the department?
Everything's going well. We are, like you guys have heard Chief say in the past, we're here for, our major concern is actually public safety, of course. So we've had an increase in juvenile violence across the country. That doesn't change here in Charleston. We've still got those type of same issues. But other than that, no other changes.
Any questions for the deputy chief? All right, my only question is, are you having to expend any of our resources from CPD to send up north or?
Yes, we're actually getting ready to send a contingency of folks up to North Carolina. Hopefully they'll leave Sundays, probably gonna be about 10 officers and 2 supervisors. So hopefully they'll leave Sunday morning and they'll be up there for a week, and then we'll be looking at sending another 10 to 12 once they return.
Perfect. All right. Hearing no other questions, thank you. All right, next up, let's talk about vacancy updates, Steve.
Not much of an update since the last time. We have a opening in District 4, or District 3, which is Councilmember McBride. That was Twan Fielding's spot. He is aware of the vacancy and actively working on that. District 6 is Councilmember Gregory. That position has been open since April of 23. He has been notified, as has the mayor's office, regarding that vacancy. We have District 12, which is Councilmember Parker. That was Ms. Grant's position. She also is aware of that vacancy and is told that she's working on that. And then we have 2 student openings, which are the mayor's appointments, and he is aware of those as well.
All right, perfect. And for my part, I've reached out to the council members. I've notified the mayor's department. I've also reached out to resources within the department themselves, especially as they relate to the 2 students. I've reached out to Jerome Smalls, as you know, and then asked Captain Mitchell and their team to go through the student resource officers to find us, candidates. I did, I think it's been pretty open. I did request that they try to target, minority students, so we have a better representation of our youth than we may have in the past. So I know that's been pushed on. I'll look for Captain Mitchell and her team to really push that down. Also, recently I did meet with some of the folks from Cajun and did request they're helping staff those. So if they've got youth involved with them, we're certainly welcome to having any nominations. So this is a community request. It's not a specific request. All right.
If I may ask, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
what's the total composition of CPAC?
Total composition
We
is
have
a total of
18.
17, I believe.
18.
18.
Is it 18?
18.
18.
It's 12.
So each council member, the mayor has 3 at large, and then there's 2 students.
4 large.
Huh?
4 at large for the mayor.
I thought it was 3. You sure? Is it 4 now?
Yeah, so each council member has 1 appointment, and the mayor has 6. He has 4 at large and then 2 still.
Okay, my apologies. So there you go. Yes, sir.
Couldn't go down the list, but you said Gregory's position's been open since 2023. And there's no like thumbprint, like, hey, you gotta do this to this.
You may have
No,
a
no,
bigger
no.
thought. Hey,
I'm just-
Gene's, I mean, I can't tell you. I know Gene has reached out. I've reached out. I've said it to him in person. I know Steve pesters on the emails. You know, I've told Cage and I've told everybody. I mean, you know, especially when you have a council member who's pushing for this type of focus, when they don't give us the resource, I don't hold back on my opinion on that. It's like, guys, you know, step up. So
Said we would sign up to help
yeah,
take
so
care
we're
of it.
we're gonna keep pushing him, but just so you know, one of the things that we put in place for council members who abdicate that responsibility is we passed guideline changes last year, I believe it was, to where if their position sits vacant for over 30 days, the mayor can then put in his own appointed person. So we have notified the mayor that, you know, he can appoint to that. We prefer the council member do it because we want broad representation, but if not, that's what happens. So yeah, if you're as bothered by it as we are, use your thumb too. The more the merrier. Our goal is to be full because we have a lot of work to do. And we also want to show the city and the community that there's an emphasis being placed on this important thing that we're trying to do here. All right. Next up is my update. So basically the majority of what I've been trying to do for the past couple of months is getting into the logistics and the facilitation of this meeting. We talked about it a lot at the last meeting, the dynamics on, you know, the logistics of what the community wanted, what we recommended for the ERA meeting. We wanted this to either to be a special meeting. We did push that subject. It came back as a no. We continued to push to say, hey, we'd like to have a broader audience. But at the end of the day, we have to go with what's given to us. So we then circled together. Dave, I worked with Dave and Tommy quite a bit one-on-one, as well as Jill, to make sure that we had the logistics in place to hold this. We did make the decision, as most of you all know, to eliminate most of the business stuff we normally talk about in this meeting so that this didn't take up the ERA portion. Didn't look like an abbreviated as a small piece of business. We wanted to make that the focus. I know I've attended 2 meetings with CAJM, one through a Zoom session, one in person on Monday, which they referenced. I was very happy to see a broad representation of CPAC interspersed. We don't sit at our own table. You know, I appreciate you all branching out to make sure that you're hearing, you're also educating at the same time. You know, at my table, I know, you know, we had folks asking me questions, you know, what's the department doing about this? What's going on here? And we're here to educate the public because we do have the access. So, and it's also to bring back some of our, you know, what we hear from the public back to the police department as well, because we're not just voices, we're also ears. So it's important that we relay that. Really, that's been the majority of it. Attended the city council meeting. Our own member Doris was, you know, recognized by the city. Appreciate those CPAC members that joined Doris. It was, I was really proud of the fact that she invited us up there with her. I thought that was a nice touch. You know, she really, you know, she and Twan are really the foundation of CPAC, and everything we do is built on their shoulders. So I really appreciate the city recognizing Doris. That's pretty much, I don't have a very long-winded update. Most of my efforts have been focused on how are we going to get this done? Can we get it done? You know, the back and forth that took up my unpaid volunteer time. So any questions for me? All right. Well, I appreciate that. I'm not gonna push that too long. All right. So, I'm going to say that I want to turn it over to Jill. For those that don't know, you know, I know there's a lot of members of the public and everything. In fact, I was actually asked a question on Monday night whether the city actually had somebody in charge of that topic of community policing and the data and that type of, you know, that research and everything else. And I was very proud to say we have Dr. Jill, and that's her specialty. So Jill has worked really closely with the ERA assessment team. She was their liaison with the department. I know they met with all the leadership and everybody else, but Jill was the primary liaison. I think with her background, that kind of, they were talking the same language, so they can go in the right direction. So the chief has asked for Jill to give the report on the ERA, the racial bias audit's final report. And like the deputy chief says, this may say final, but nothing's final. Everything's a work in progress. So this may be the final written report specifically to this, but I believe, and we know that as CPAC, we're going to be pushing this to be a topic that's never ending. It's always evolving and being addressed. So I'm going to turn it over to Jill. Jill, if you would introduce yourself, and then it's all yours.
Well, actually, let me check in with Dave. Did you?
Yeah.
wanna-
I'll just quickly give a
Yeah.
background of what we're doing right now. So
Yeah.
CPAC asked CPD just to give an update on the external review and assessment. But at the same time, CPAC also reached out to the community to try to gather questions, to get those questions, to come to CPD to get some answers, all related to the external review and assessment. And so after tonight's ERA presentation, CPAC understands that the CPD is considering the ERA as closed. However, a lot of the items will roll over into their Chief Walker's new strategic plan. And so at this time, what we'll do is we'll have Jill give her presentation on the external review and assessment, the final report. And then after that, Jill and I will dive into question and answer series from the 10 questions. Well, we received more than 10 questions, but I boiled them down to 10 questions that Jill and CPD have prepared answers for over the past week or so. So Jill, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Very much, David and Paul. I appreciate it. So there's a lot of tech stuff happening up here, so I apologize if the entire screen is not visible. I'll do my best to walk you through. So as Paul indicated, I'm Jill Idson. I have a PhD in criminal justice that I got from Temple University in 2020. I grew up in South Carolina, always had family in the Charleston area, was happy to come back and help this department improve itself and also, continue to improve. And that's really the story of a lot of this journey, is that it's never done. It's always getting better and better. And that we may have different phases of the work never stops. So what we're going to talk about today is basically, we're going to provide the same report that we gave to the Public Safety Committee in June. However, we're going to work in and try to clarify some of the potential confusion or elaborate on some points to help the community better understand what our commitment is moving forward. So the presentation is going to be hopefully brief, but I'm going to cover the following areas. So I'll first provide a background just for everybody in the room so we're all on the same page regarding this long process that started before I was employed here, but started essentially with the CNA audit that was commissioned by City Council, supported by the community, was not a consent decree. So this was done voluntarily. This was not something that was ordered by the courts. So the agency took this on willingly. Then, as part of the assessment of how well the agency responded to the recommendations from that review, we had an external review and assessment where we brought in a new group of people to assess the progress on those items, and they released a report, so I'll summarize that. And then finally, this is the assessment of the audit. So hopefully everybody's following me, but this is the CPD's final response to tell the community how it's moving forward based on all those recommendations over this long period. And then I'll summarize or end the presentation with the discussion of next steps, and then we'll kick it over to Dave and we'll talk about the submitted questions. So the background. So in 2019, as I said, the city of Charleston commissioned an audit of racial bias on the Charleston Police Department. Again, not a consent decree, was community supported, but voluntary. So that assessment looked at 5 different areas of practice broken down into traffic stops, which we're now considering as motor vehicle stops, because as we've talked about at length, there's a lot of other reasons besides traffic stops that people will conduct, that you will have an officer pull you over in your motor vehicle. Another area was complaints, uses of force, community-oriented policing, and personnel practices. So what that assessment did was it did data analysis, it did lots of interviews, there were community forums, there was document review, and it produced 72 recommendations for action for the department. So there is a QR code here. If anybody watching wants to read that report in full, it is available on the website and can be accessed here. The final recommendation of that report was to have someone else, like an external review panel, come in and look at the progress that the CPD has made once it implemented those 72 recommendations. So there was a multidisciplinary group of researchers that came in 2023, and they worked with the CPAC to a certain extent to put together some of the elements of that report. That was broken down into 3 sections. One was on fidelity assessment. So that was basically looking at documentation, doing interviews to assess, to look at what was done in response to the CNA report and how the department had basically implemented the recommendations. And then scored the department in those areas. And we'll talk about those scores in a minute. The second component was another racial disparity analysis. That was a quantitative review of data. And then finally, there was a community engagement component. And that had, I know several people attended the focus groups that were held, the community meetings to assess community sentiment. And also our part of that was we conducted a community survey with the help and support of CPAC in getting that out. And so again, we had another report come out. This one has a full version and a short version. And in response, we had another 24 recommendations that were provided to us. So in total, the department over the last since 2019 has had 96 different recommendations to review and assess and determine whether they can implement. So the findings from the ERA assessment, which was basically the assessment of the department's implementation of the audit, was the following, and I have to write this down because I have percentages here. So in the 5 different areas where CNA laid out recommendations, the following is found by the ERA team. So they said, quote, that CPD has made a good faith effort to implement the recommendations. They found that of those they were able to assess, and there were 5 of them that they couldn't for various reasons. However, the 67 that they were able to assess, they said that 54 of those, or 80.59%, had clear and complete documentation of implementation. A further 11 had, or 16.41%, had some documentation of implementation, but that there was additional work required to fully meet the commitment. And then there were only 2, or 2.98%, that where the ERA team found there was insufficient documentation of implementation. So there you can see that in the bar graph. That's also in our final report if you wanted to go back and refer to that. So so that was the fidelity assessment. Here's overall the other main high-level findings from that report. That since the CNA audit, the CPD had very good improvements in data collection and analysis capabilities. When it assessed racial disparities, however, there were present in motor vehicle stops and in use of force. However, there were no disparities found in outcomes for complaints. The report also lauded the CPD for improving its community-oriented policing and making it a central part to the department. But it did also note, based on the feedback from community members that attended those sessions, that communities' perceptions of the CPD varied widely, and that there was some dissatisfaction in the community about transparency and engagement. So as I said before, since the process began, the CPD has received 96 different recommendations. So 72 from the CNA report and an additional 24 from the ERA report that came second. And so what we did following the receipt of the ERA report was we reviewed all of the recommendations and we scored them based on the CPD's assessment, whether we considered them complete, in progress, or other. So the in progress items are the ones that we're going to be carrying forward in our strategic plan. And here's a breakdown of how, and again, not all 96 of these recommendations were provided from the original audit. Some of these, 24 of these, the CPD received less than a year ago. So we've lumped them all in here together just to show you our assessment of where we are with the 96 that we received. So for traffic stops, there were 10 that were complete, 9 in progress, 1 other, use of force, 14 complete, 4 in progress, and complaints, 10 complete and 4 were considered to be an other category. And that's situations where, for example, the ERA team determined that they were not feasible, or the CPD determined they were unfeasible, or in one case, one was canceled by CNA. So that 4 of those fit that other category. Community-oriented policing, 11 were completed, 7 in progress. Personnel practices, 14 completed, 10 in progress, and 2 had unique circumstances. So on the whole, that's a lot of progress, but there's still a lot of work to be done that will be carried forward. And so here's a high-level overview of the continuing work that, even though we're not going to be reporting out on the ERA or the racial bias audit anymore, these are the areas that we're going to continue working on with our next strategic plan. So high level for traffic stops, the CPD commits to continued community collaboration And you guys, as the CPAC, as appointed to help us engage with all the sectors of the community, we hope that you will be able to help us with this particular commitment that we have. We also have a Bureau of Justice Assistance grant that I'll talk about in the question answer section more in depth, because that was one of the areas where there was confusion. We're also going to continue training on appropriate techniques for traffic stops and justifications, and continue to improve our data collection systems, because the data are quite complicated and we can always do better with producing data that are that will help us answer the questions that people have. For use of force, there's going to be additional policy review training, and where possible, adjusting the collection of data and data collection instruments and analysis. Again, community-oriented policing, we will continue to collaborate with you all. And we hope a lot of the recommendations from this arena specifically mentioned you all as helping us. So we look to you for advice and guidance and assistance in being able to reach the areas of the community that want to be engaged. And also, we have our captain of the community-oriented policing division here, and she and her team are constantly out there engaging community members in various events. And we have data collection instruments that we use in those capacities. And then with personnel practices, I'll talk a little bit more about this in the question answer. We're going to continue to create a training assessment process, review policy, complete a staffing assessment that was actually part of on the docket before the ERA. And then as we can, develop new tracking mechanisms and form new community partnerships. And I mentioned that we consider all of the recommendations from the complaint section to be either complete or funding dependent. So how we're going to move forward. So obviously, we're at a point where the work directly related to the audit and the ERA is completed, but all of the ongoing efforts that we're going to merge with our next steps, they're going into our strategic plan. So what I mean by strategic plan is that is a formal outline or framework where an agency will look at its long-term goals. And that is something that is determined collaboratively. It engages many levels of the agency, also city stakeholders and community representatives. And so once we basically get everyone together and talk about where the agency wants to be in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll be able to determine objectives and action plans and then metrics to try to keep us on track. And we will have to provide regular updates. As Deputy Chief Jenkins said, we're constantly updating internally on the process of where we are with improvements. And so we will obviously be providing regular updates to the CPD city and the community. We don't have a schedule set yet, but with any big project, we provide information publicly about how we're doing in those areas. So, okay, and now I'm at the point where I can jump into the specific questions, David, that you guys formulated.
Jill, thank you for that update. Appreciate that.
Will
go ahead.
questions relate to this be a part of this process? Maybe the question I have may be answered, so I'll defer to you.
So the questions I'm going to ask now are the ones submitted by various community groups.
Yeah.
Now we have 10 of them. And
Yep.
I'll just wait.
Yeah. So the first one is, I'm just reading them out loud, everybody can read them, but will CPD include in its strategic plan specific actions, details, and timelines for reducing racial disparities in vehicle stops? And then kind of, we'll talk about both of these at the same time. The second question, what are the processes, timeline, and engagement methods for developing CPD strategic plan to ensure community input and engagement outside of CPAC? So Jill will answer both of these kind of together.
Yeah, we kind of, the ones that were related, we try to answer together as opposed to repeating ourselves. So I would like to, and the top says the challenge of reducing disparity. So I'd like to preface my response by acknowledging the issues that we have whenever we're working in the area of disparities, especially disparities in policing. And so one thing we do know is, and this is said in the literature, I said I'm a social science girl, so I'm always looking at the literature on what works and why. What we know from the literature is that disparities in all areas, but especially policing, they're easy to identify, but they're very hard to fix. And I think that this quote from a recent article from researchers that looked at a policy and intervention from Michigan State Police summarized the issue very well. And this is talking about academia, science, social science. We have developed a firm understanding of how to identify traffic stop racial disparities through various methodologies. And there's a lot of debate on what works best. However, the problem is we have little empirical evidence on what works in mitigating racially disparate traffic stop behavior once identified. And this is true. So one thing I can tell you is that there were none of the recommendations that were produced by either the CNA or the ERA audits were guaranteed to reduce disparities. Because this point sums it up. Science is too, we don't have enough information from science. This area of study is evolving. And frankly, what we find when we look at the literature and the studies that have been done that are rigorous, that have a comparison group, do not show that that there are a lot of strategies that are effective. The evidence is quite mixed, in fact. What you will see is that a lot of well-meaning jurisdictions, states, municipalities have put in place depolicing restrictions, and they put in place trainings, and they put in place all kinds of other programs. What we often find is no difference in disparities when we come in and we look at the outcomes later on. And what we are seeing in some studies, there's a recent study that came out a couple months ago about the LA traffic policy that was put into place. There were restrictions on ticketing non-moving violations. What we actually saw with that study is potentially negative unintended consequences. The researchers estimated that there was an increase in property crimes as a result of that policy when there wasn't any substantial difference in disparity. And the other thing, we don't have enough information on the other consequences of these types of policies. Policies are going to impact everyone in the community. So there may be some communities that feel over-policed, and they may find that these types of initiatives are beneficial for improving relations with the community. But on the other hand, the CPD, as other police departments, get a lot of interest in having more policing in their communities. And so we don't know the impacts if there will be a potential under-policing effect. And if communities will feel like you are not paying enough attention to violations of law on the road. We also don't know a lot about police morale, and we don't know a lot about what the impact is on traffic deaths and other public safety outcomes. So we're just not there yet in terms of being able to identify a solution that can be implemented on a broad basis. Moving on, one of the reasons that we can't really find solutions that work is it's difficult to define the specific causes of disparity, especially when you're using administrative data. So this is a quote from the racial bias audit that was done here. And they specifically identify, they acknowledge, while our analysis can uncover disparities in outcomes based on the race of the driver, no current techniques used in law enforcement analysis can establish whether those disparities are due to racial bias or other underlying causes. And that's not for lack of trying. It's just we don't have the data to tell you every possible situation or every characteristic of these types of interactions. We find that we're often missing data on driving behavior. We're missing data on the intent of the officer, crime patterns, what happened before the stop. And so we really can't know for a fact whether that outcome was caused solely by bias. And so it's just one of those things that we have to acknowledge as a limitation in the work. And that's why finding solutions to the problem is really a hard effort. And then finally, disparities are very widespread, and they're related to broader social inequities. We see them everywhere. We see them in education, in healthcare, in economics, in housing. I could go on. I used to work a lot in the correctional system. We had disparities in corrections and courts. And so all of these systems are interlinked. And so to think that the police can unilaterally enact a policy and affect disparities, or at least eliminate them, is not possible. It is very challenging, and that's why it is unreasonable, in my opinion, to expect that any of the recommendations would on its own achieve equity and disparity. So with that, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. There's a lot of positives here. So what do? So what we do as an agency is we try to promote best practices and evidence-based practices. And that's what we are committing to do with creating our next strategic plan. So the strategic plan that we have currently ends in 2025. And so we were due to, create a new one based on new circumstances and improvements in the agency. And the final recommendation from the ERA report was that we start working on a new one. And so we've committed to doing that. And because these are two parallel self-improvement processes, us committing to finish the work from the ERA or the recommendations from the ERA that we've accepted, and also doing a new strategic plan, it made sense for us to have those processes combined so we can focus on one area for improvement. And so we're still figuring out kind of how the stages will evolve as we put this in place, but our commitment is that, this process will involve collaborative meetings with people in the CPD at all different levels, stakeholders within the city, our city partners, and community representatives. And so we're also going to be, as we committed, we're going to look at all the reports that have come out and the things that we said we want to do. And those will be basically interwoven in our strategic plan. And so we have one focus, it's broad, it's agency specific, and it is comprehensive. So to produce this, one of the ways you can do this is to do a SWOT analysis, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's often done in business, and it helps you understand potential risks and opportunities. And so we can engage in that type of practice to help us identify the overarching goals, objectives, and an action plan and metrics. And so our expected completion is that this will happen in 2025. So long-winded answer to 2 questions, but there you go. Okay.
We'll move on to the next question.
Yes.
The next question is, will CPD publish the 2023 vehicle stop data?
Okay, so thank you for that question. So I'm not sure if everybody is aware of this, but the CPD has, and this was before I started in 2022, they've always published data using the Public Data Initiative, which is available on the website. And currently, you can find our field contact cards, which have data on warnings and citations. So you can go and download that now. And I checked this morning, there's even data from 2024 there. It's not all of 2024, obviously, because we're still in it, but they are available. Now, these are raw data. So as we know, like, it's hard for anybody that isn't a data nerd to go and pull down a spreadsheet and then do their own analysis. So we acknowledge that that's a limitation. And so moving forward, we've committed to release a new analysis of motor vehicle stops. So to help kind of summarize all of those data points that are on the website. And that is going to be produced on a yearly basis, along with our other annual reports. We have an internal affairs annual report and we have a department annual report. And so those will be released at the same time each year as those reports.
So real quick, let me interject. So Dave, just so everybody understands, you've been working collaboratively on this. I think this is probably a good time for you to address the efforts on data that you're currently working on, where you're planning to go.
Yeah, so this has been kind of the primary piece of the ERA subcommittee. A lot of the other items have been pushed off to the communication subcommittee. But what we're hoping to do here, Jill is committed in the next couple of weeks that she'll sit down with some members of CPAC and we'll look at kind of some mock reporting that CPD is looking to do at this time. That'll come out next year for 2024 data. And are you saying it will include as well 2023 data?
Yeah, the information that we're mocking up. One of the recommendations from the ERA report is that we look at trends. And so we acknowledge that. So what we're trying to do with our reports is not just have crossovers.
Right.
We're trying to build out, data sets or data analyses over time.
Right. And so one of the important things that I discussed at the table I sat at the Cajun meeting the other night was simply that we have to be real careful with the data. We can't expect the 2024 data to be the same as the 2020 and the 2021 data that Cajun was showing the other night, because there's been improvements in data collection. We've gone from field contact cars to a more digital way of doing things within the police vehicles. And so what's going to be important as we meet in the next couple of weeks is understanding what data is really available. And then how do we look at it in terms of reporting, and can we start trending it? If we have 2023 data in there, I think we can start trending it. But it might be hard for us to say, let's do a 10-year trend analysis. I personally don't think that's possible from my very limited understanding of the data. But if we can at least start trending the data 2023 and 2024, I think that's a huge win. And then we should analyze it and then we can communicate and report it out. But I'm looking forward to that. And CPD has made that commitment that they will have the data out there. Everybody's heard it now. So I think that's a wonderful step. We should really look forward to the information.
Thank you. And the other thing I think when it comes to data collection, I think the evolution of what's being captured, I think Charleston Police Department should be given credit, and so should all the advocates. They were using a statewide system that did not include fields for a lot of the data we were requesting. And so it wasn't a matter of CPD just, arbitrarily, can we do this? They had to actually go through the state. And we received that pushback towards the beginning, and we didn't let up. We were like, okay, we get that. We still want it. We still want it. We understand your limitation, but why does that have to continue to be? So CPD actually led the drive for the state to include these fields within their software, which is I'm in technology, it's no easy undertaking to take an umbrella system and add that. So now, not only will CPD have these fields available to improve our data collection, now all these other communities in the state that use that same centralized system will also. So we're no longer having to compare data for Charleston is apples to oranges with what's happening in North Charleston or Greenville. Now, when you look at the collective data within the state, you'll actually be able to compare, even though the jurisdictions have so many differences, the data themselves will be ones that can be looked at. So I do commend our community groups for pushing for it, CPAC for also picking up that mantle. And lastly, the department, I know Captain Cortell was really big help with that, when he was leading that team, and Jill as well. So should be noted that it wasn't captured because they didn't have the ability, and now you have the ability.
Right, and that's a lot of the issues with data are, as you said, there's multiple different systems that the CPD, it doesn't choose to use, they're forced to use. And a lot of the times they don't talk very easily. All right.
So, quick question, will this mean it'll be end of June?
So we normally, I'll just say, like, it just depends on what's going on. We don't have a specific date that we release
Last
these.
year, when was last year's report issued, the two?
It was, I
annual
think it was
report?
before June, like it was,
Yeah.
we endeavor, the first quarter, honestly, like, that's very challenging because the data are still kind of being collected and cleaned from the previous year. So I want to say that this year it was before the end of the second quarter, like.
April. It was April,
Yeah.
I think.
It was April.
Yeah. Yeah, so we don't want to overpromise, which is why we said second quarter, but that's our goal, is to get it.
Under promise.
Okay,
Under promise, over deliver.
yes, so, yeah. All right, moving on.
Yeah, so the next question is the issue of racial disparities in traffic stops being addressed with the powerful problem-oriented policing model funded in 2023?
Okay, and yeah, not the next.
Oh, I'm sorry, and the second question as well.
Yep.
What's the community communication goals, activities, and outcomes contained in the work program of the BGA Smart Policing Grant that includes CPAC?
Thank you. Okay, so there may be, I'm gonna try to dispel some confusion, I think, that's out there about this. So the grant that we got, we applied through the National Institutes of Justice through the Smart Policing Initiative. That's a portfolio of monies that are available for innovative work. But you have to meet the criteria that the money can be used for. So this particular solicitation or this proposal that we submitted had to basically work on crime problems. And we selected that we would be working on violent property crime and traffic collision hotspots on all the different teams in the Charleston area. So this grant is not specifically focused on disparities. It's focused on using innovative methods and collaborative approaches to try to reduce these really hard to get at crime problems that are identified using data. So it is not specifically, we are not in the position to use it to specifically address disparities. That being said, the reason that I think there might be confusion is the work in this area overlaps with some of the recommendations that came out of the CNA and the ERA report. So what we found is that we would like to be able to improve the efficiency of our data analytical capabilities and our presentation of those data. We know that from you all, there is a hunger for more data, more information on what the agency is doing and what those outcomes are. And so these funds will help us to fill holes in our current data system, to allow our data analysts to do more work more efficiently. And so that's where there's a lot of overlap between what's happening on this grant and what's happened with the racial bias audit. And additionally, we hope that this will open up new avenues of collaboration with the people closest to the identified problems. So one of the tenets of problem-oriented policing is that you engage stakeholders outside of the police department to help you better analyze, assess, and come up with solutions to the issues. So we are not in a position where we can identify specific stakeholders at this time, but as the other question had, that's one of the things that we'll look to you all to do, to assist us when we have our list of hotspots in the community that we're going to be focusing on, help us get the word out about what we're trying to do, help us bring people to the table that have involvement or knowledge or proximity to these issues, so we can engage them in collaborative solutions. And beyond that, we will, as I said, we're going to be producing a lot more data products. We hope to put up a dashboard, and you all will be great to give us feedback on what's understandable, what makes sense, and all that we have to work out. It's a 3-year project, so it takes a long time. I hope that clarifies some of the potential confusion related to one project versus the other.
The next question, how will individual CPD police officers be held accountable if found to have racial disparities in their policing?
Okay, thank you. So as I hope my answer to the first couple of questions really brought to bear the complexities of being able to prove that racial disparities be biased. That's not That's not something we can do. So the existence of racial disparities is not indicative of discriminatory or biased policing. And that being said, the police department has a strict code of policy that officers are required to adhere. We have an internal affairs division, and they will investigate any sort of claims of discrimination. And also as the policy subcommittee knows, we put those policies online. You all can read them, you have access, you have input into how they're worded. And we certainly appreciate that. And I'm actually gonna ask DC Jenkins to jump in here.
Just like Jill just said, our internal affairs division, they're in charge of handling any issues where an officer has a complaint that comes forth against them. We've had that protocol set up, and that's the way those type of investigations take place. If we have any issues where there's a complaint against an officer for excessive force or racial profiling, that goes through that office. So that's a totally different system. And back to disparities again. Disparities are in every aspect of society. So it's hard. There's no way we can account for disparities in police officers out there doing that type of stuff. We can't account for that. So, but we do have a mechanism set up, and that's our internal affairs to deal with any type of complaints that come in from citizens or within our department.
Okay. Next question. Do you have a question?
No.
Okay.
I'll wait.
Next question. What are the planned activities in 2024 and 2025 to engage directly with the community on any racial disparity information and to collect feedback directly from the community outside of CPAC?
Thank you. Also linked with our first answer regarding the complexity of racial disparities and everywhere. We do not have any community sessions focused on racial disparities.
Next question, has CPD requested funding or estimated costs for any community surveys in its 2024-2025 budget request or proposals for grant funding to sources, including the Lens Foundation?
Okay, yeah, thank you. So, no, we have not at this time. And the reason is because that's kind of putting the cart before the horse. What we aim to do is to determine, again, what our objectives and our goals are for the next 3 to 5 years. And that will help us once we know what those are, we can have a better idea about what is needed in terms of data collection or projects. And so if there is one that would lend itself well to a community survey, at that time, we would be able to spec it out, to try to figure out what type of expertise we need, what type of sample we need, and who we would be working with and what, just all the details is something that will really be dependent on the goal and the objective. And since we don't have those yet, they will be part of our strategic plan. That's not something that we've been investing our time in.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead, Paul.
Because this is this is your expertise, and you worked with Bob, and I think that's his expertise, Dr. Kale, right? We just did a survey.
Yeah.
From your professional, not your police department opinion, but your professional researcher opinion, what was your opinion of the survey that was just done?
Oh, so the one that we did, okay, so I think that given the resources that we had available to us, we did the best we could. And I think that if you were to do a very generalizable, very detailed representative sample, that's going to cost tens of thousands, if not $100,000 to do properly, because that requires a sampling frame, which is a list of people in the community that make up the population. Then you have to pull a sample because obviously it's very time consuming and expensive and not practical to try to talk to everybody. So you have to have efforts to try to create a generalizable sample. And then you have to incentivize people to do the survey, because how many surveys do we all get in our inboxes every day? But we don't, they don't offer us anything in response. And then even when you incentivize it, whether that's monetary or discounts or some other benefit, then you have to go out and try to track down people to get them to respond to the survey. And that can take knocking on doors, that can take phone calls, that can take flyers. Like, it's very expensive, very labor intensive. And so this is not something that would be a small budget item if we were to do it in a way that we could everybody would have confidence in the result. So I think that the effort that we did in the community was, we acknowledged the limitations at the front, and we did the best we could. And we got some valuable information on what people in the community want to see.
Thank you.
So Jill, the answer to this then is no, there's no plans to build any budget for 2025 to do surveys.
Not for 2025 at this point, no.
Yes, want to get that clear.
Yes.
The next question is, what is the status of the review and update of the professional development and training policy? And what has been CPAC's role?
So this was addressed at the subcommittee meeting for communications in July. So the training division is working on updating their policy and also creating a schedule for what we call block training. That's an annual suite of trainings that are offered every year. Motor vehicle stops was a part of that training. Basically they are, the part of the motor vehicle stops training was a part of this year's training. So next year we have to develop, topics and training sessions for the following year. So we're at a point where work on that is ongoing. So the hope is that at the next CPAC meeting in December, we'd be willing to showcase that and what the plan is and get your response to the 2025 block training.
All right, and then the final one, what information on the historical context of policing in Charleston is included in the current training? What is the status of the incorporation of area resources, including the International African American Museum?
Thank you. So this is something that came out of, actually the initiative to do this did not come from the ERA, but it overlapped with one of the recommendations. So we currently have all of our new officers in our police corps do spend a day at the International African American Museum. They get a curated tour and discussion of the artifacts and of the whole museum, basically the whole suite, and then they get access to ask questions about really anything they want, but we want them to understand what the community and the history is like in Charleston. So that's happening now. And then I'm going to toss it over to Captain Pertella, who has a lot more information on other areas in the department where the historical context is discussed.
So when we talk about just historical context, it's just more than that, than the African American Museum. So in our police corps, that's a mandated 12 weeks that the officers have to go through before they go through the academy. That's something unique to the Charleston City Police Department. No other police department requires it in the state. The state doesn't require it. CPD requires it. So when you get hired on, you do 12 weeks here just in Charleston. And what we talk about there is ethics, and that's the breakdown of values in the oath of office of which we are all sworn to uphold. And we go through ethics, we talk about that. We talk about fair and impartial policing, the focus of implicit bias, and how to learn to overcome these biases if we do have them. There's a civil rights presentation also tied to this. And then there's a whole section on community-oriented policing, which focuses on the different communities in Charleston. And it's not just the African-American community. It could be the Jewish community. It could be LGBTQ plus community, whatever community there is, of how do we interact with people from these different communities. So that's just in police corps. Then when you're a full-fledged officer, as Jill said, we have block training. And these trainings aren't optional. They're stuff we have to do. And once again, we're one of the only departments in the state that mandate 40 hours of training for CPD. So some stuff we talked about before is gender identity, and it's breaking down the barriers and the misnomers about different members from the LGBTQ plus communities. We talk about ethical policing is courageous, and that's a duty to intervene. So if you see somebody doing something they shouldn't be doing, having the courage to go in there, telling them to stop, or actually reporting it. We also had a whole session on multiculturalism for law enforcement. This was an in-house program that we did. We reached out to different communities. We had a canned question and answer session with different representatives on what are your thoughts about law enforcement? How do you feel when law enforcement stops you? What could law enforcement do better to improve relationships with your community? And all the officers had to go through that. And they heard that raw feedback from our members within the community. And we just had a recent training on de-escalation training on how do we bring down a volatile situation to have a cordial conversation when things are getting rough out there. So those are just trainings that we offer. And once again, those are mandatory trainings that we have to do, and they are not voluntary.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes my presentation.
Jill, are you available to take any questions for any of the CPAC members?
I'll defer to the chief.
Chairman, if you guys have questions, if you can get them to us, we will get back to you at.
Just, I was asking for if there could be general commentary from the CPAC members.
We take a few.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, just really brief because we've got to get on with our agenda, but Harrison, I know you had a question.
Well, there's a conclusion, I guess, that disparity is easy to identify but hard to fix. I mean, I think we should strive to accept that as a premise and continue to work toward that to, even with the data, at least the statements or findings that you have. I'll use justice as an example. Justice is an aspiration. Justice is not fair and impartial throughout this country. And we know there's been disparities. I was at the Cajun and I heard Judge McFarland talk about what his son went through at 20 times. I think he was 20. Did he say 20?
No.
And you said what?
4.
No.
He said 20.
No. He gave 4 examples.
Or
And so I think for Charleston to aspire and become a model city, I think I've lived in Memphis and I live elsewhere, and I know this police department is better than some of the places I've lived, but to start with something that is sort of defeatist, I think we accept that there are disparities in this community, that we, through the strategic plan, that we will build to try to address that perception and that reality. So that's my initial comments about that. I just find it, and as a person who's experienced certain things in this country, I just find it a little off-putting to put that as a sort of lack of expectation that this disparities are something that sort of in my own sphere, but it is real. It's a living thing that people experience in this community. And I think we shouldn't dismiss that. I'm not saying you fully dismiss that, but I think we should aspire to keep it as a point of reference, point of reality, and that we work toward addressing and changing. Intrinsic bias is a reality in this country, but we know that it exists. We may all have it, but and I think you were saying that, Captain Capella, that you are trying to, through your training, to address some of these issues. But to say, because of some research, that this disparity is something that's so illusory that we don't want to dismiss it in some way, I'm using that small dismiss. I think that's a disservice to this community, disservice to the Charleston Police Department.
Yeah, just speaking of the judges, I was there. And when the judge got up there and gave his examples, I really wish it was a question period. Because what I wanted to know is of this 20, because I was like anybody else, I was, wow, that's terrible. Were any of those lodges complaints to even escalate that? Because I wanted to say to him, 20 times, number one, your son had no problem telling people, my dad's a judge. I can't do that. My kids can't do that. But I wanted to know, having a judge as a background, knowing that he didn't fear repercussions from it, or any of those 20 report as complaints. Because if you don't file a complaint, I mean, granted, I get it, but that's a judge of all people, you file a complaint, you follow up. I want to know, was an officer reprimanded? What happened there? And that just fell flat on me because I'm like 20 times and you're not following up. Well, I'm a judge. I called the police department. My son filed a complaint. I told him the process to follow because like anything else, if I get bad service somewhere, so police department's no different. If I get bad service somewhere, either A, I don't go there anymore. That'll never prevent it. Or, I respectfully, even with a business, register a complaint to give their management team an opportunity to correct it, right? Because what we don't know, we know the department doesn't review every minute of police footage, of body camera footage. We know that. But if they're alerted to an instance, and we need to make sure the community understands, that's part of our educational process, we have many ways of lodging a complaint against an officer. You can give a compliment too, but we have websites, we have the desk sergeant, we have supervisors, so many vehicles. We need the community to understand that's a way of helping address this, not just a community meeting, but actually going in real time when something like that happens, register it and give these people an opportunity to find and root out rather than hearing in a meeting, 5 years ago, my son got 20. I mean, that's horrific to hear, certainly. Right. But were we part of did you become part of the solution when you heard that?
That's
So-
fair. That's fair.
And
And in
if-
fact, I was gonna ask, when I see him, I was gonna ask him, why your
What
son?
what did you do? I mean, you weren't afraid to say you're a judge. I mean, if I've got that ability, I'm gonna call. you
And
know.
Harrison, I think what's gonna be important, right, is CPD can say and kind of address things, but we are gonna start seeing more data, better data. And, you know, we're independent, so we can look at it, analyze it, and ask those questions, right? I think that's gonna be critically important,
Yeah.
right?
But
Theory
but
versus
it'll be maybe June
Right.
before you get to that.
But we do on that website, because I've been to it, you can see the data in real time. What you're not getting is you're not getting that general summary where they're painting. You know, the truth is, what are they gonna do? And I mean, it's fair. I would do it in my job. Data is a wonderful thing, but I can paint any piece of data you give me and I can build a narrative around it. And I promise you'll believe me. You know, one of the data that was shown in the CAJA meeting that I had a different take is they showed the disparity on, okay, we had this many motor vehicle stops and the percentage was much higher on blacks getting a warning than whites. And that was shown. Well, look at the disparity. And I turned around and said, wait a minute, you mean you're letting them get off more? I'm getting a ticket because your bias is the opposite. You're trying to obscure and say, well, we want to look like good guys. So if you're black, you're going to get a warning because there's no warning given for a non-offense. A warning is not given over because I was mistaken. You were pulled over for a light, whatever it was, right? So I'm more likely to get a ticket. I looked at that data and said, well, that's telling me the opposite picture. So we can paint, that's their summary coming out then. That's what their narrative involved. And that summary, what I'm looking at is in real time. The other thing that I want the public to know that may not be involved in CPAC meetings a lot is we just stood up the complaint subcommittee. And that was a recommendation from the city council when CPAC was actually formed. We took the steps now that we're getting membership. We took the steps, Jamie Kahn has taken that over. And when he gives his report in a little while, I know he's going to talk about the first set sample data that team can now use to make sure, as I talk about it, you know, file a complaint. Well, is the public confident that the complaint process works? So CPAC's being involved in that. And I think that's really important for the public to understand that we're moving towards that direction on that. We're not an oversight. We can't look at the, you know, we're not going to look at this officer was reprimanded for that. We can't do that, but we can look and see if the underlying, the complaint process is actually going through as they say it does.
Chair, with all due respect, I'm gonna disagree a little bit with
Sure.
your analysis of the
Absolutely.
data. If we're gonna take as a given that there are racial disparities, and I think that's what the conclusion of the surveys were, and we do have much better reporting now. My question is, are there plans at this point to start tweaking policies or tweaking procedures, changing some dials and seeing if that changes those disparity outcomes? So for example, more speeding tickets, less taillights, or more taillights and less speeding tickets, and see how that changes the numbers. Are there any ideas for experiments like that going forward now that we have some data?
We don't have any I mean, I think a lot of it is just producing the data. That's the first step, right? One thing I can say is that the analysis that was produced through the ERA, that those data ended in 2022. In 2023, there were changes in policy and re-emphasis in policy on procedures and motor vehicle stops. And, you know, correct me if I'm wrong about any of this. So that's one area where we could look to see if there's a difference. We just haven't been able, because again, everybody kind of wants to know right away, and I understand, what's the impact of this change? Well, we have to wait to get the data and then we have to analyze the data. So that's one area where we can, when we start producing this report that we're going to do every year, we can look to see, okay, well, we know that we did this we made this policy adjustment. We can tell because we have it in record when that was. What do we see as a result? So that's one that I would be interested in looking at because again, the ERA did not comment on that one because they didn't have data that followed that change.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Joe. All right. And if you would, could you, as part of our minutes, when we publish the minutes, can you make that presentation part of our minutes? Copy the PowerPoint. I mean, it's public. I mean, I can't see where.
It's being live streamed.
No, it's being live streamed, but it's part of our minutes, like any document that we receive, PowerPoint presentation, just attach it on there.
The minutes are all online, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
it's all
So
public.
we send them to Maylee over at the clerk's office and they post.
Yeah, attach your PowerPoint to that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Merged in one document, right? Yeah, it can all be combined.
Online.
All right, so moving on, let's get to the subcommittee reports. The first subcommittee report is mine for executive subcommittee. So we did meet, the majority of our meeting was to go over, really the focus of it was to talk about the logistics of this meeting. It was also to encourage members to participate in the Cajun Forum. I think that worked out really well because we had a good group of people. What I also think was very helpful because we do communicate out to the larger groups, the community groups. Our meetings are public. We do want participation. So we did, at the executive subcommittee meeting, we had representatives from different groups. They were able to give their feedback. So it's not like a little more controlled environment like this. There was a back and forth. We also invited a member of city council, Mika Gatson. Her role, not city council, but the mayor's office, her role is specific to that. And so I thought it was important to have somebody from the mayor's office be a part of that, to give her input, but also to hear some of our feedback. We talked about some of the constraints that we had as a group. We have a great working relationship with the department, but it's never 100% perfect. We see opportunities, scheduling meetings, certain things like that. You know, we're very open about that. So we're happy for the mayor's office to hear that as well and get our feedback so that we, you know, we're not just asking, getting nothing. We're going to use different avenues to try to get forward our agenda as well. We do not work for the police department. We work for the city of Charleston, right? And the community. So, I mean, really for my executive subcommittee, that was the bulk of it. Are there any questions for me on that? All right, moving on, policies and procedures, Joe.
Yes, so we had a very nice meeting on September 9th. We were joined by Ty and Gil, our two newest members. It's the first time I'd met them. Thank both of you for joining us. And we were reviewing CPD's responses to GO 8, which is the fair and impartial policing GO. And we were delighted. We'd asked for several things in prior meetings, and we were given all of them. So I'd like to thank the department for that. We'd asked for a change log so we could easily review the changes. We got it. We asked for red line. Here's what changed in the policy. We got it. And most of our requests for changes to that were granted. So I'd very much like to thank the department for that. We then went on to review GO 28, which is Signal 46. For those of you unfamiliar with Signal 46, that's basically the call in the cavalry, we've got real trouble signal. And that one turned out to be quite simple. There's not a whole lot to that one. And frankly, and luckily, they don't have to use it very often. We will be at our next meeting reviewing either GO 23 or GO 25, and we would welcome you to join us. Any questions?
Yeah.
Honestly, off the top of my head, I don't recall.
Let me ask the guru.
But please.
Come on, guru.
So I'm going to stall here for a minute until I get queued up, but those are very important policies. And they are going to be, so I get logged in here. I believe 23 is use of force. Let me double check.
That's an important one. They're all important. That's it.
Yeah, that's particularly important.
Response to resistance. And then GO 25 is going to be less lethal and lethal weapons.
Yeah, publicize that because you should get pretty good participation with that.
And I'll send out documentation to the full committee if anybody wants to join us. So,
any questions for Joe? All right, let's move on. Jamie, complaint review.
Yes, we met last month and we discussed the example summary that was provided by the department probably this past summer. We made comments on that. We made recommendations to the Office of Internal Affairs for any future summaries. We discussed how we operate and use the data available to us, namely the dashboard and the Internal Affairs report. Aid us in our charge of analyzing trends and patterns. And so we charged ourselves to review that information, come up to speed with it, and be prepared to talk about it at our next meeting. We submitted a written report as well.
Thank you. Any questions for Jamie? And do you need more members for your?
Yeah, several people have expressed interest on it, and I know they're out there and get them in the next meeting.
Okay, appreciate that. All right, Dave, you're the man of the hour. You're right.
For ERA, we have not met in a few months, and there's a reason for that. ERA audit subcommittee was really set up to make sure that we're addressing ERA items, and as we've been talking about, it's kind of broken down to two categories: those that CPD are responsible for, and those that CPAC are responsible for. CPD is stated a couple times tonight now that theirs are going to roll into the strategic plan, and for CPAC there were 7. 6 of them we've basically identified as communication subcommittee being responsible, and the 7th is vehicle stop data, which many of us are actively working on with CPD. And so really at this time, what I would like to do is put forth a motion to dissolve the ERA subcommittee, because at this time it's really just vehicle stop data, which is something we're all very aware of and we're actively working on. I don't see we need an active subcommittee just for that. As well, ERA is going away. It's now going to be more strategic plan. And I can also say that those 6 items that fall under communication subcommittee are being professionally handled by Tommy Hummel. So I think that's very good there. So overall, from an ERA subcommittee perspective, I don't see the need for it at this time. And so, Chairman, if you would, I'd like to put forth a motion to dissolve the ERA subcommittee.
Okay, is this coming from a committee? It doesn't need a second, so is there any discussion?
Just a quick question, if it's kind of morphing from DRA into the strategic plan, should we simultaneously create a subcommittee, for the strategic plan to kind of ride herd on that and monitor that and keep abreast of that and report back to the CPAC?
Would
Do not construe that as a volunteer to take over that.
You know how that
The
works.
strategic plan is a multi-year thing. I'm not sure it
Yeah.
We're
warrants
not gonna have any.
monthly
like, we're looking-
meetings.
Yeah, it's not gonna be done for a while.
I think maybe strategic plan updates every 6 months or something, maybe
Right.
CPAC.
Okay, good.
That's my
That's
opinion.
good. No, that's
You
good.
may-
understanding. We would-
Yeah, I think what may be a good idea based on that, it's maybe making sure that, at least every meeting, because we meet every 2 months, and just make part of the CPD readout, and I make it part of the agenda, just an update, whether it's the chief doing the update or Jill doing the update or whoever the designee is, could be, Captain Cretella, whoever the chief designates, just giving a strategic plan update and using that time for us to ask questions, because when they give a report, you can ask questions or give input. And then probably at those times where they're actually doing work, maybe say, okay, now you guys are focusing on this. Let's, can we be involved? Let's make sure we're invited. Let's do that. I think that's a big thing. I think we all have to remember, and I hear it all the time from the chief, we're working police department focused on public safety. We don't have a whole team of people sitting in a room doing a strategic plan. So that's why, some people wonder why it's unlike a corporation where, I can grab 10 people and go, hey, this is your mission for the next 6 months. They don't do that. It's really, and I will take this opportunity to say that we're going to lose a lot of focus from Jill, because Jill's now moving towards doing a lot of different police work, administrative work, a lot more focus on grants to get the money to do some of these things. So the chief's told me for about 3 or 4 months now, I'm pulling Jill more away from doing the day-to-day CPAC, turning over a lot. Some of you who don't recognize May Lee over in the corner, May Lee's from City Council, the mayor's office. And when Jerry and I first started on CPAC, I know a lot of y'all are new, we had a member of the city, the city government who actually facilitated our meetings. It wasn't an employee of the police department. It was an independent who did all the administrative stuff. And we've just been very fortunate. I don't know how fortunate we were with a predecessor, but under Jill, we've had a lot more access than we probably ever had in the past. So I want to give everybody fair warning that immediate access, she's not going to be 24/7 available to us. She's going to be available, but if you get a delay in her response, if she can't tackle everything, that's because her focus is being moved more towards working on the strategic plan, working on some of the data related information, helping with the training. She doesn't do the training, but she provides her research feedback and her educational feedback to the different leaders within the department on her recommendations, not being a police officer, but through her education. So we want to thank you for that. We know we're not losing you, but I want everybody to know that that's in play right now.
Okay, so one last thing. So right now, the old ERA subcommittee, as of now, only consists of Joe and myself. And I know Joe is kind of chairing another subcommittee. But we hope to be meeting with CPD in the next couple of weeks to start looking at some mock reporting. If there are any other committee members that would like to attend that meeting with me, I know in the past, Jerry had attended with me. Anybody that's new on the committee that would like to sit down and be part of that, I welcome your assistance.
So thank you. So the motion's on the table. Is there any other discussion? Okay, let me call the motion. So all in favor of, I would say, disbanding. I don't know the proper term. You gurus know it. But terminating the ERA subcommittee. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
Okay, we have one abstention and the motion carries. So the motion passed. The ERA subcommittee is discontinued going forward. All right, next up, communications subcommittee, Tommy.
Yeah, so as David mentioned, there were 6 ERA recommendations that were passed along to the communications subcommittee. Some of them we found to be a little bit repetitive, which happened to just be more so engaging with the community. Dave and I, for example, we went to an HOA meeting in late August, kind of just as an introduction, and that was with the West Side Neighborhood Association, and just kind of introduced who CPAC was. There was a good amount of engagement, and a few people knew had heard of CPAC, which we thought was, great. I think there was about 25, 27 people in attendance. And from that was when the Citizens Academy was taking applications still. I handed out a little flyer about that, and 2 people signed up from that. So, I thought that was a good recommendation and just a good way to inform the public of who CPAC is and that, there is a liaison to the police department out there through us. So that was an example. I am working with Lieutenant Gibson. We are going to get the video in the works. The first video is going to be titled and focused around how to expect a CPD officer to engage with you on a routine motor vehicle stop, and that is directly addressing one of the ERA recommendations as well. So that is in the works. I can say probably confidently that we'll have that done by for sure the end of the year. So that is another item that will be checked off the list shortly. So.
And this will be one of those short
videos. Yeah, I believe the ERA
20 seconds, 30.
Yeah, exactly. So we want to target towards social media where the large majority of the people aren't going to sit through a 10, 15-minute video. We want to target kind of quick. So as you're scrolling through, you can just watch a 30-second video, because I'll be the first to admit, my generation, we don't have a long attention span anymore. So especially when going through social media. So we want to make it quick, concise, and just as educational as possible. I've reached out to Mr. Jerome Smalls as well and offered, or I asked him for, advice on if he can maybe get with some of the younger people in the community. And I'd be curious if there's any future topics for additional videos in the future that they would like to see covered. And we're always open to suggestions too on different videos that we can cover, and look forward to making this.
And that's also why it's so critical to fill these student roles that we have, because I can't give advice on how to do a TikTok video. I mean, for me, if you don't have a 20-minute presentation, you've lost me. But the attention span of these kids is really 15 to 30 seconds, and they know how to get the content out in that short frame. I don't. Related to one of the comments made, I know you were working with Lieutenant Gibson. Can you talk about your engagement with the Facebook posts and what's going on with that?
Can I defer to Lieutenant Gibson to?
Okay, so let's just use today's, your efforts on social media, but also, using this as a specific. We know we wanted to publicize it.
So one of the challenges we're going to have is fighting the algorithm on social media. So we have a significant following across our social media platforms. So anything that we post, for example, most recently is the storm-related information, and it gets a lot of shares, a lot of traction. That's going to mute our other posts, because based on the algorithm and the engagement that you're going to get from the post, that's going to be public first. So I was doing a little bit of research before here, because it's still on our stories. That we can click on the link and you can view, and that's still visible. But I think that whenever we actually publish the post, we need to reach out to the members of the CPAC. And if you're comfortable doing it on your personal pages, keeping it visible across that, as well as maybe having the city, I haven't talked to them about it, but if the city's page is comfortable with sharing it as well in terms of an access, and sending it out there, that may be helpful, but we fight the algorithm, unfortunately, with social media, and that's just sort of part of what we do. That kind of goes back to, we have just about no more than 30 seconds to capture someone's attention. I call it the power of the thumb. If we don't post something that is capturing the power of the thumb, then it's going to get muted and move on. And unfortunately, I think in this case, as I said last week, that if we post it, I do fear that storm-related coverage is going to mute it.
But overall, we did post, or at least try to get it out there for our meeting today, because I know, Jerry, you had asked that earlier, and we did, but it kind of got lost in the algorithm, unfortunately, which, I mean, it should get the majority of the attention with the storm and how people can be helped with that, so.
Yeah, and when he talks about the algorithm, that's for the general public that may not follow their page or be a member or be a friend. That's for the general public, is that, you know, Facebook knows you're in Charleston. So it's going to try to target you with information from Charleston. So when it's coming from CPD, you're not going to see everything coming through. It's using this algorithm. What's important to that community? What's important to your demographic? There's a lot of things pulled. So like you said, one of the things I would recommend you do is when you've got an event or something like that, like I don't need you to send me storm warning stuff personally to publicize, but if there's an event, if there's an important topic to go out, we've got, like, I'm in a homeowners association. I've got different community Facebook groups, the city council members. So one of the questions I asked at the beginning of Jill was, you know, kind of about the survey, right? You know why that survey was really skewed? One city councilman posted it. Okay. One city councilman, Ross Appel. And believe it or not, the majority of responses from the general community that weren't targeted directly from CPAC, because y'all did a great job, the majority of responses came from Councilmember Appel's district. Do you think that's reflective of our city in general? But you can't blame him. He did his job. And it was sent to all. The survey, he was given the same information they all were. So encourage these city council members that portray themselves, you know, that are community leaders, that are activists, that are church leaders, all these different people, get them to also promote it, because that'll get it out to the masses. But that's why, to me, that's why the survey was skewed, is because one city council member did it, his community jumped in and did it. Well, they kind of gave a view that may be completely contrary to what some other people may feel, although it's representative of part of our community. So you're welcome to send it to me. Use CPAC, let us get it out to our community groups. We send it to CPAC, let them send it out. So let's bypass
we
that.
are working on to help with that, because it's difficult to rely just on social media.
Right.
I recognize that. So, you know, we have the newsroom now. We are in the process of creating the events portion of that. That allows the subscribers, and that allows us to bypass the social media sort of algorithm that we fight with. So have you ever noticed, if you Google, I'm looking for an iPhone, then all of your ads are iPhones and all this other stuff. That's sort of what we're fighting against. The vast majority of the population is not Google or searching for or interacting with the Charleston Police Department, just for various reasons. We do something different if there's an update on a large crime scene or significant arrest, but fortunately that's not always the case. But with the newsroom, we can have the events calendar. You can subscribe to it, and that's immediately going to go to it. And that's going to complement the social media. And also, if we're able to, I can't speak for the media, but if the media is willing to share it, we can also do things like that as well. But once again, you have to win the producers, we have no autonomy of whatever they share, but trying to complement it in multiple ways.
And also keep in mind, CPD is also publishing those feel-good things that they do. And that, you know, obviously on social media, they want to put out all the cute little pictures and everything they do. Well, the more they post, the more water's down, and the social media will come along and say, you're over posting. We're going to start hiding a lot of your information because you're constantly generating content. So the other thing that we've told Tommy to do is I've given him a list of I used to be the chair of this. I've got a master list of media contacts. So it's not just, the department sending it out to the media. It's his CPAC. We can also be a secondary source to communicate to them. That's resulted in a lot of times we had Channel 5 coverage. It was from that, we get an interview and they'd reach out and say, hey, can we interview on this topic coming up? We're going to go through the session. We'd watch the news at night. Post and Courier is not really big on doing it, but some of the news stations really are. And Channel 5 is very big on that. you were gonna add something else?
I was gonna, just to clarify, since we're on the topic, the feel good is not just to feel good. It's not a fluff piece, if you will. It's something that we do to drive that engagement, because the purpose of what we do for social media is not to entertain. We're a police department. So whenever it's meant to get information out there, that is our duty. That is my team's duty. So for the bridge example, for example, the best example I have that was the most urgent is all of those things before that led to that moment to where we had to notify you of something that was happening and get that information out as fast as we could. That was the best way that we could do it. I would use the Twitter example of the bridge, lost propulsion going toward the bridge, thousands and thousands and thousands of interactions with that, just based off of everything we posted. So again, it's not done just in vain or because we need a comment or a like. That's simply just not the point. It is an emergency situation. Thankfully, it's very rare. It is done for a very specific purpose to inform the public.
All right, any questions for Tommy? All right, thank you. Okay, Jill, you're up again.
I know, I think you guys have heard enough from me today. Really, the only thing, because you kind of got a little window into my world with everything going on, past, half an hour or so. I just, and you already did this, Paul, I wanted to introduce May Lee, from the clerk's office. They're helping us now, with equal meetings, and this is more for people that want to participate in citizens participation. Up until this point, we've had people kind of calling in and leaving a voicemail on my answering machine, but I just want to alert everyone that we're going to be handing over those responsibilities to the clerk's office. So there is a new phone number that will be posted on our agenda. And then I believe that is just for comments, correct? Just people. Yes, so just if you want to leave a voicemail with comments that she'll read here or summarize here, you could do that. Otherwise, there is a website that they can to sign up to speak, right?
On the big website, it's called Innovate. There's a link on the main page. If you reach out to and you can also submit written comments for whatever the meeting, for all of them, that are public actually.
It's also listed on our agenda.
Correct, both methods are on the agenda, but I know there was some confusion this time because of our transition of duties, so wanted to make everyone aware that just look on the agenda and the methods will be posted there.
And I'm going to endeavor to try to I want to get the agenda posted for the city. I know it's normally you want to do it a week before, but because we have a lot of citizen engagement, I'm going to try to push to get it out, and have it publicized at least 2 weeks in advance, just so, because we know when they're coming in. I've usually got the agenda set by then. We don't usually have emergencies. All right.
That's it.
Any questions for Jill? All right. Who's taking over? Is Captain Mitchell online, or did somebody else decide they were stepping in?
She is on.
Okay, Captain Mitchell, you're up.
Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry my camera's not working, but I have a few updates for our upcoming for community outreach. And we are getting ready for Faith in Blue weekend, which starts October 11th and the 13th. I'm sorry, on the 12th and the 13th. On the 12th, we will do the Bike the Blue, which starts, it's what's going to be West Ashley at the Ashley River Baptist Church. Come out if you would like to take a ride with the Charleston Police Department. And on that 13th, we will have a church service on Daniels Island at the Holy Spirit Church on Daniels Island, and that service starts at 10:30. October 19th, we will have our annual Fall Fest, West Ashley at the Carr Richardson Park. That event starts at 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. And last, our annual Halloween Howl, which is October 24th, and that starts at 5 p.m. at 180 Lockwood. That's all I have. Thank you.
Hey, Captain Mitchell, we kind of got spoiled under Captain McFadden's tenure working with you. We received almost a monthly, like a little digest. It was like a one-pager that included little snippets of all that. And we could, not only did we have it as a quick reference for us, but we could also communicate that out. Is it possible to get that again?
No problem.
Oh, perfect. I think that's a big help for us also in publicizing those events for you. Any questions for Captain Mitchell? All right. Any old business? Any new business? Okay, closing remarks. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. I definitely want to thank those members of the public, especially Cajun, for participating in our sessions of late. We encourage all, guys, reach out to all the different community leaders. Cajun is just one of many that are in our city that have, a lot of opinions about what we're working on. They have some great feedback for us, and we can take that to heart and incorporate a lot of their feedback. Again, we can also provide education. So keep doing your outreach. The community meetings is not just us meeting with Cajun and then meeting with us. It's also like what Tommy said, meeting with these neighborhood groups, because they're the ones that get a lot of the representation. I know my homeowners group, we don't reach out to the chief because what's he going to tell, my little group of Carolina Bay, we reach out to the team leader. We bring him in because in my community, just my specific one, they want to know about crime in the neighborhood. They want to complain about people are parking on the streets and doing whatever they're doing. So that one-on-one, the more this group knows that we can talk about, that's the community engagement. And we need to hear more about that and have a good indication of these lieutenants and sergeants going into these communities. I was talking with a lady from Gadsden Green and one of the other homeowner groups on this side. And she was saying they're there all the time. We meet with them because I asked the question, are you getting the representation you need? Because we talk to them all the time. He's great. And she rattled off the lieutenant. She's like, I talk to him all the time. He's great. I was like, wow, that's pretty surprising because I hear that you're not getting. So the more we can communicate that, and I would really say the more you can push to us to promote that message, the better.
And I'd like to say, as the ERA comes to an end and is implemented more into the strategic leadership, I would just like to say thank you guys for doing this on a voluntarily basis. Like, you guys didn't have to have this report and third-party assessment come in and listen to the feedback from the public. And I just think that shows leaps and bounds the dedication of you guys to the people you serve. I'm not sure how many other government organizations would voluntarily do that. And it just shows a lot to me. So thank you.
I think you get a lot of negative feedback, but I, for one, think you deserve a lot of positive feedback for a lot of work we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you
Jill,
for all
you've
that
been
you've
great.
done.
You've been great.
Yeah, Jill's, I would have to look at the guys in the uniform and say, Jill has stood on the firing line for the past 4 or 5 months. And then, the beating after the initial assessment came out, she had to absorb it because obviously, I know Chief Walker, sometimes it's better that we have Jill in front of us during some of those sessions than having him there. You all know that. Jill's professional. I mean, he's very professional, but Jill, you take it well. So I give you all the praise in the world because you don't wear the bulletproof vest, but you've had a lot of arrows shot in your direction, and we appreciate it.
It's a team effort.
All right, guys. Well, hearing that team effort, 6:38. I'm gonna. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? All right.
Second.
All right. We have 1. We have 2. Any opposed? Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming.